Earlier there was a draw, and I understand Trevor is going first in speaking, and Nigel will be answering the first question. And I now hand over to Trevor, if you would like to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Trevor Pointon. I volunteered in the parish for a long time. I will start my talk here with my opening line, which is Monsieur le Connétable, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you. It warms my heart to see so many people turn out this evening, and thank you for being here. There has been chatter in the parish. Rumour has it that I'm incapacitated through ill health, and so unable to do the job. Well, as you can plainly see, I'm here, fit, able, willing to see the election through and represent the parish fully. May I take the liberty of quoting Mark Twain? The reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. When I took the decision to stand, it was framed in my relationship with the parish as a centenaire. Delivering a meaningful service to people has to involve fulfilling their reasonable needs and aspirations. It's my intention to hold regular surgeries to assist people with their concerns and develop solutions together. I'm keen to bring the vitality of our young people back into the parish. First-time buyer housing is starting to be addressed with the development of Field 525. But with over 100 people on the waiting list, 16 new affordable properties will only scratch the surface. Some people in our parish are in need of practical welfare support. But unfortunately, we have no formal provision. It's time to claw back a proportion of the rate we pay to the centre and fund a support service that would assist the vulnerable in St John. Our economic well-being as an island is dependent on the finance industry, and so we should be doing our very best to promote continued growth in what are uncertain times. We must seek out new opportunities and look for new markets to operate in, such as financial technologies, and ensure that there is sufficient robust regulation in place to avoid putting existing markets at risk. We should also be diversifying and developing new economic streams. Digital businesses should be encouraged to set up here. The State has a duty to stimulate new and existing industry. We need to support our heritage industries, tourism and agriculture. Thank you for listening. I would ask you to consider me on May the 16th. Thank you.
And Mr. Nigel Philpott.
Connétable, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm delighted to be standing as a candidate for the position of Deputy of St John. For those who don't know me, I would like to start by providing a short summary of my background. My wife and I moved to Jersey 50 years ago, I for a managerial post in the hospitality industry and Marisha as a special needs teacher. I held several managerial posts on the island, and we've lived in 5 parishes over the time, but the last 37 years very happily here in St John. I later changed direction when offered the position of Quality Director for Jersey Tourism. It was quite a change moving from the private to the public sector. These were challenging and exciting times. I had multiple responsibilities, including the administration of the liquor licensing law. I advised on legislative amendments to the law, resulting in the successful provision of al fresco drinking and dining. Imagine what our island would be without it today. With the establishment of the Economic Development Department, my role changed. I spent the last few years of my career with Locate Jersey. This I successfully did until my retirement in 2015. I've spent 50 years extolling the many benefits of living, working and visiting Jersey. I would wish, wherever possible, to retain the island's unique way of life and its quality differences. I'm passionate about our island. This is a hugely important time for Jersey and its inhabitants, and there are many challenges, both local and international, that the island will face over the coming months and years. It is vital that we have a strong and stable government to meet these challenges. As a candidate, I believe I have the necessary experience and energy to best represent you, the parishioners, in the State's Assembly. If elected, I would work in harmony with the Connétable and the other parish officials, using my expertise on the many issues that arise needing political intervention. This is a team effort. I've built up a reputation for being a good negotiator, a diplomat, and applying common sense and reason to decision making. I will listen, learn, and analyse before making any decisions. You will see my key aims in the full manifesto, but here's a brief summary. In the parish, I'm strongly supporting the village plan. I want to investigate road safety and allied issues, which have been brought to my attention already, and the provision of mains, water, and drains to those properties which don't have them. In the island, importantly, reform of the states, ensuring the new population strategy strikes the right balance, keeping taxes low and simple, creating more first-time buyer and affordable homes, work to reduce the cost of doctor and dental treatment, and giving full support to the agriculture and tourism industries. To summarise, I believe I have the right balance of experience, energy and commitment to represent the interests of you, the parishioners, in the State's Assembly. It would be an honour to receive your vote on the 16th of May. Thank you very much.
So, who would like to ask the first question? Gentleman in the front row. Just a minute, wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Hello, Michael Jones. I've lived in the parish for 20 years. I've taught in Jersey for 29 years. My question is that our public services are facing somewhat of a crisis. We've got a massive teacher shortfall, and likewise with nurses. And my question is a simple one. How would you address that situation?
Well, you're quite right. I think it's a very difficult situation. Recruitment in Jersey has been very easy. As we've said, this is a fantastic place to live. But we have to be quite frank, it is an expensive place to live. If we're looking for expertise, it is very difficult when somebody is told that they can only come for 5 years and then they have to leave. You can imagine family disruption, children in schools. Quite often it's the partner who decides that it's not for them. So recruitment looks easy, but retention is completely different. We can only provide satisfactory salaries, find some reasons for accommodation for them, and just welcome him into our community and perhaps remove this 5-year limit which is applied to many of them.
Sorry about that. Yes, I mean, I would echo a lot of that that's been said. I have personal experience of working in health and the problems that health have in not necessarily recruiting people, but retaining people. Recruiting people is relatively easy when you compare the pay that professionals receive in Jersey against the pay that professionals receive in the United Kingdom, for example. But unfortunately, teachers have had their pay reduced as new starters. What is absent is the fact that families that relocate to the island are not properly provided for, and they discover that the cost of living is particularly high. They discover that they're not given a housing package to settle into. They discover that the partner in the relationship who is perhaps not able to fill an essential job can't find work, or can't find work that's suitable and pays sufficiently to maintain a standard of living that those people have been used to before they come here. And I know of many people who've come, settled in for a while, but just cannot manage the environment that Jersey is to them. It's very difficult. There needs to be a proper recruitment and retention plan in this instance.
Thank you. Second question. Gentleman over there.
Stuart Langhorne, new to the parish, also a teacher. Following on from that question, Charlie Parker, the new chief executive, has announced his 30-year restructuring plan of the States, regardless of who the new team is that we are about to elect. So my question is quite simply this: who is in charge, the chief executive or the chief minister and the people we're about to elect?
Well, I have to say that some few weeks before this campaign began, Charlie Parker was given quite considerable powers as the chief officer. It concerns me that a chief officer has been given those powers, especially, as you say, at a time when we're electing a new group of politicians who will more than likely have considerably different views to many of those that are retiring from the States. But the politicians need to have control of government and need to have a very watching brief over the civil servants who provide the services that the island require.
Yes, I think we've got to consider that we're in Jersey Limited. This is really just like a big business. As far as I'm concerned, the politicians should have set the brief for the business to operate. Charlie Parker's coming in as the chief executive. I'm presuming, I'm not privy to the information, but I presume it's under a very strict contract agreement, and we expect him to perform. There's been regular complaint about the cost of the civil service and the cost to you, the taxpayer, and his mandate is to change that. His mandate is to look at it hard-nosed and make reductions and improve matters completely. So I see Charlie Parker as being the managing director of a company, Jersey Limited, and I see the politicians as being the shareholders on behalf of you, the parishioners, who keep a monitoring brief, and I presume there's a service level agreement, and if he doesn't perform, I would expect that he would be dismissed in the same way as any other employee would be.
Thank you. Can we have a third question? Yes. Kate Lewis.
Kate Lewis, both candidates have touched upon the importance of the finance industry in Jersey, but I'd be curious to know where do the candidates see the future of the tourism industry lying, and what merits do they think there is in sports and event-led tourism moving forward?
Tourism is the second pillar of the economy. It's only second because of the expansion of the finance industry. It has shrunk. When I first came here, there was 26,000 beds. There's now 8,004 in round figures. But what is left is of a much better quality to meet the demands of today's clients. As far as I'm concerned, I'm totally for event-led tourism. You mentioned to somebody Edinburgh with the castle and history and everything else. One of the first words that they use is festival, because man-made. So I'm totally for event-led tourism. The days when somebody would come for a fortnight with a handkerchief knotted over their head and sit in the sun have gone. That's part of the competition. The people going to the Costas, cheap transport, convenient and cheap accommodation and sunshine. So we've got to think out of the box. We don't have good weather here. We don't have a proper winter like with snow. Ski resorts have two times when they can make money. Summer and winter, two distinct areas that they can concentrate on. So as far as Jersey is concerned, event-led tourism, sport tourism, cultural tourism, all the culture that we've got here on the island. We're only 40 minutes away from our core market, the UK, and we're going to have to concentrate on all of these different areas because there has to be a reason to visit Jersey. The fact that this is a lovely place and I'm dedicated to it, that's not enough to bring people. We have to create events. So I'm more for creating events island-wide, look at the success of the triathlon. Thank you very much.
Event tourism has become a mainstay of the short break industry in the tourist industry here. We are developing other sectors, and those sectors include going to the European mainland to attract people in, and we're increasingly bringing German tourists in that are have an interest in what happened in this island back in the late 30s and the 40s, and to look at their heritage as well as our heritage. I agree that event tourism has increased the numbers coming to us. I think it will continue to do so. It won't be the be-all and end-all. I think that the states do need to increase their input into the development of tourism, as with agriculture as well, because we need to expand those industries if we're to survive any shocks to the finance industry. That really is what I have to say there.
Thank you. Have we another question? Mr. Votier at the back there. If you go down the middle, pass it over.
Good evening. My name is Paul Votier. This is more of a parish question. I was in the honorary for 12 years, and one of the problems we always had, people were moaning about people going too fast down country lanes. I don't know why we can't use speed cameras. I know we can't use them on the main road, but I don't see why we couldn't be the first parish to have a simple speed camera in these lanes, and people would have no more questions about who's speeding or not speeding.
During the course of this campaign, I've had a number of emails from parishioners, especially in Zion, about the volume and speed of traffic going through Zion. I'm able to assure people that I'm on top of that because I live there, and I know what the problems are. It can be quite a frightening experience if you're a young mum with children trying to walk along the paths in Zion. I have made suggestions that we will be looking at traffic calming methods, not necessarily the St Mary's style, but we do need safe crossing and pedestrian-operated pedestrian crossings could be catalytic, or could help to slow traffic down.
My question was actually, what is the credit? Why don't we use speed cameras? Not really how to slow traffic down. Why are they for speed cameras or against?
Thank you. For or against speed cameras?
You can put speed cameras up, but if people know they're there, of course, they're a deterrent. Of course, if you don't put any film in the camera, they are a deterrent only. The debate is being had by people, including the state's police, that speed cameras might assist. It is a fact that we might actually bring the system to a grinding halt if we didn't put bobbies on the side of the road with their handheld cameras, rather than having a camera on the side of the road. If we're going to catch speeders, fine. But I think we are likely to deter rather than catch speeders.
Thank you. Nigel.
On balance, I'm for them. I've seen examples in the UK where there are some solar-powered cameras. There's one particular place where if you jump the lights, which are a 5-sided light system, you jump the lights, there's instant recognition of your number plate and the driver. It's cheap, it doesn't require manpower, it's recorded, there's absolutely no question of the evidence. And the only thing that I would be concerned about is that if we had speed cameras here, the people who wanted to speed would just go somewhere else. I think that if there was going to be speed cameras, there should be an island-wide principle of speed cameras, not just one parish or one area. But on balance, I think I would be for them.
Thank you. Now, another question. We have Mr. Day in the front. Wait for the microphone, please.
Strangely, I'm another teacher, or was another teacher, retired. No, I've been in the parish 27 years, I think, 28. The question is, both the late Ralph Firebert and Rejean, some of the longest-serving politicians, question the balance between the economy and population as being somewhat a very difficult balance to overcome. I wonder how you view them, see the balance for the future, because we're looking at both population and the economy being in balance at the moment.
Whose turn is it? Nigel.
Nigel.
Yeah, it's your turn first.
I think this brings us on neatly to immigration. I know people are concerned about immigration, and so am I, but I'm not concerned about controlled immigration. According to some of the information that I've read, by 2035 there'll be 3 people retired and 2 people working. That just cannot be a balance. I'm no clever financial expert or economist, but it seems to me that it's pretty obvious. So we've got to have a balance of new people coming into the island. My hope would be that it would be young people returning to the island who would come in. We have to therefore make appropriate opportunities for jobs, and doubling back, we have to, in educating those people, educating them in the appropriate manner and them knowing that there are jobs to come back to. So we are repatriating the locals back into Jersey. They may go away for 10, 15 years, as my daughter did, but eventually they come back and bring added experiences to Jersey.
Yes, it is a conundrum that if you have a population that's growing older by the minute, you do need an increasing number of younger people in the population to fund the welfare and the benefit system that supports that older generation. We can't put a cap on immigration. We have to be selective about those people that come to the island, and we do have to encourage as many of those people that have gone out of the island and gained qualifications back into the island for the good of the island. Many of my son's generation have left the island. They have jobs elsewhere. They're productive for somebody else, not for Jersey. And we need to get them back by attracting industries that they can fit into. And in doing that, we will bring back a youthful employment force.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Mr. Rondell in the front. You can come meet this way. Need it for the TV.
I did hear the comment about not needing the microphone, but gentlemen, one of you 2 gentlemen will be elected into the House on the 16th of May. Today we've seen the headlines on the newspaper about Dignitas. Would one of you, or both of you gentlemen, give us your views on Dignitas, and will you please, if you are elected, take it to the States for debate? Thank you.
Phil, I do have to apologise, but given the pressures of the day, I haven't looked at the newspaper today. Perhaps you could give me a little bit of background.
Yes, there is a lady on the front page of the Evening Post who's seriously ill with cancer, and she would like Dignitas, and obviously it doesn't apply in Jersey at this time, and would like things moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, working in health for so many years, I have seen a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And there have been occasions when I felt that it would be appropriate for this individual to be away from their suffering. Now, albeit the medical and nursing professions and others try and assist people with their pain in that they will administer painkillers. There are definite points in people's lives, in terminally ill people's lives, in which they may well have very reasonable grounds for deciding they don't want to pursue their life to the end that is both humiliating for them and painful for them. And they, I believe, should be able to choose to end their lives at a time that they choose, with proper controls, with proper checks and balances. But that facility should be available to people who wish to end their lives.
And the second part of the question, would you take it to the States if needed?
Guernsey are currently debating this. I would most definitely be supportive of propositions that were associated with that movement, because clearly, if I feel that way, which I do strongly, if I were not to support such a proposition or take a proposition to the States of that sort, I really would not be honouring my own beliefs.
The short answer from me is yes. I believe that everybody's responsible for their own actions, and if somebody decides that there is no future and the medical profession agree with them, I think there has to be some checks and balances. I think it's everybody's right to be an individual, and if that's their choice, perhaps not to put their family through suffering in a different way, then I would be for that. I think I would have to do a little bit more research before I would guarantee that I would take a proposition to the States, but I'd be very happy to look into it. And my belief is that, from my point of view, it would be for me.
Thank you. Could we have a slightly more... Andrew, yes, cheerful question.
Well, it's slightly more cheerful. We've got some of the lowest home ownership rates in Europe. What would the candidates do to promote home ownership, particularly making it easier for young people to get on the home ownership ladder?
It's Nigel first.
Well, I think that there's obviously, in the first instance, we've got to be able to build sufficient houses for them to move into, which is one issue. I think we need to look at various schemes, perhaps a deposit loan scheme. It might be low interest, it might be no interest. If we made it no interest, we could link it to the increase in capital value of the property when they paid that back. So it's like a form of share. There's equity share, and in Trinity there's been that very good example of the homes that have been built for first-time buyers there. So I think there's a multiple of things that can be done, and absolutely, as I said in my manifesto, that we're looking to, or I would be looking to promote first-time buyer and affordable homes, and I think that we need to look in perhaps several different mechanisms where we can help youngsters get onto the ladder.
Fine. I agree with all that, and I think we do have to have facilities in place to allow people to find the initial down payment on a property. And shared equity is one of those ways of doing things. What we currently have is a situation in which fairly highly paid individuals are having to go to the bank of mum and dad on both sides of the family to find sufficient capital to put down as their deposit. Because saving the deposits that's necessary on some of the properties that are available to first-time buyers takes years and years and years. We need to facilitate that initial purchase, and that can be done, as St. Peter have done, by shared equity, and there are other methods that we can achieve that. But we need to look at them, and we need to implement them.
Okay, thank you. So, do we have any more questions? One here.
Paul Mathams. My question is on electoral reform, and I'm interested to know what the candidates think about some of the proposals that have been debated in recent years. And I suppose a straightforward question, would they still be standing if instead of it being as one seat as deputy of St John, it was as one of a number of deputies of a super constituency of northern parishes?
I think that's for me. My personal feeling would be this is an opportunity that came along, and I saw it as an opportunity to serve the parish. It follows, therefore, that I would not have been standing if it had been part of a larger district constituency. So the answer to your question is no, I probably wouldn't have stood given that situation.
I put in my manifesto, I think reform of the states is a primary objective. As I sit here now and as I'm been looking at it over the years, I think there's far too many, 49 people to run a community of 100,000 people. It's just not time and cost effective. I think that there should be no less senators with an island-wide mandate, because I think in a democracy that's a good idea. I think they should be rewarded more. That would probably entice people of the right calibre to come into the states. I agree that although there's the rivalry in parochial terms as there is between Yorkshire and Lancashire, that to actually amalgamate parishes there may be some concerns. But from an administrative point of view, I think that to have 5 or 6 super parishes, the constables to remain in the state, because I think that, as I said it again in my manifesto, I want to keep the uniqueness of Jersey, and I think that the father of the parishes is most important. So I think that there should be less people. I think they should be better remunerated, and that would attract younger people to come into politics with the type of experience and qualifications. They currently earn, say, 80, 120,000 pounds in the private sector. Why would they move for 40,000 pounds? To be, without being rude, public fodder. They put their head above the parapet, they have to say what they mean, and they serve the public. Why would they do that at all? But if we paid them properly, and less of them, then I think that that would be good for the island and good for democracy.
I forgot to say earlier, you can applause whenever you want. Right at the back. Mr. Hinno.
Carl Hinno. Constable, I want to continue developing the theme raised by both the candidates in their manifesto and their opening speech vis-à-vis the shortage of first-time buyer homes. We've identified there is a shortage. We've identified, following a question a few minutes ago, how they can be funded. What hasn't been addressed is where we're going to put them. Will the two candidates please tell us whether they'd sacrifice greenfield sites or whether they'd be prepared to rezone less valuable agricultural land around the parishes? Looking at St John's in particular, I see from 100 yards away here 2 large fields which would be suitable to increase our village within St John's. Would they sacrifice those, or would they be prepared to identify land, as I say, less valuable to agriculture somewhere else in the parish?
Trevor, I think you're first this time.
Initially, my response to the idea of building on green fields is an anathema. There is a brownfield site in the village that would accommodate 10 to 20 new houses. I say in the village, close to the village. That has not currently been exploited and will need some investigation. But we need a considerable more new houses in the parish as a whole. When we talk about green fields, we talk about those with grass in them. I see a difference between those with grass in them that are agriculturally useful, are being used, are productive, and those that are not agriculturally useful. They've gone out of use. Farmers are no longer utilizing them productively. We do have to consider those non-agriculturally usable sites as well as brownfield sites. And there are a number of those in the parish that the parish might well be able to negotiate with the farming community to put into the island plan as building land. That's where I stand.
I think that we need to keep hold of every bit of green space that we possibly can. I stand to be corrected, but I think that there is already a policy that's been discussed, I think perhaps with agriculture and the planning office, that there's no particular restriction on fields under a certain size. We ourselves here are trying to put a village development in here. We need it. There is going to be a bit of sacrifice. We're going to lose a field. But the gains are more than the disadvantages. So sometimes you have to move with the times. I would want to build firstly on brownfield sites and would only build on green fields if there is nowhere else to go.
Thank you. So, the person at the back.
Stephen Dissenqua. Globally, we are facing a crisis with plastic pollution, and I think in Jersey we're woefully behind the times when it comes to recycling. All of plastic, all waste. How do we plan to address that as a parish locally and then wider with Jersey?
Nigel.
Oh, thank you. The truth of the matter is, at this moment of time, I have no definite idea. It's a major, major problem. I see people talking about how they can improve matters. Trying to move over from plastic into paper. I don't know how the food industry can cope with that, and in the short term, it all comes at a cost, and that's really why it is. If you want food in the way and the price that we get it, that's one of the sacrifices we've got to make. I think it's dreadful. I think it's a major, major problem. But sitting here now, I don't have the answer to that. But I would be interested, because of my environmental intentions, to listen to anybody who's got any ideas as to how we should do that. And if it's good practice that's found elsewhere, we should adopt it for Jersey.
In actual fact, the parish of St John was possibly the first parish to introduce a recycling scheme and to distribute recycling boxes to every household in the parish. We pay for it through our parish rates, and each week we have a collection of recycling material. We're very fastidious about that, and I think that an awful lot of people have their backs behind that. So as a parish, we're making a real contribution to making sure that waste is kept to an absolute minimum, and the tins, the bottles, the plastic, and even at home, we recycle cardboard. We have our own method of recycling cardboard, but obviously that's something that needs to be put onto the list of recycling. It does need to develop. It's already in train. And we need to make that much more effort. I think St John can say it's done very well so far in its contribution towards recycling.
Thank you. On that point, we have got recycling boxes. If anybody needs any, ask the secretary and you can collect them, and every month it'll be picked up. So, could we have the next question? I think there was somebody over there. Yes.
Simon Airy. The question I've got is primarily to do with our relationship with the United Kingdom. Mr. John Mann and others are bringing a proposal to the UK Parliament, or the House of Commons, that we have a mandatory disclosure of beneficial ownership of companies. Simply put, are you in favour of our continuing dependency in relation to the UK, or would you like to consider our own sovereignty?
We have a long history, I believe 800 years is bandied around, of being independent of the United Kingdom. If the relationship that we have as dependent in relation to defence and for other international matters becomes difficult for us in terms of our ability to keep the island's economy moving, then we will have to take, I think, quite serious decisions. Serious decisions that would be even greater than the decision we need to take in the near future about the role of the bailiff, for example. It's not inconceivable that we might move away from the United Kingdom, but it would present us with considerable difficulties. It would be a move that we'd have to take with significant thought behind it, and it would need significant negotiation.
Yes, I think this has been discussed in the 50 years that I've been here. I think it's been discussed at least 5 or 6 times and been suggested. It is a thought, but if we went that way, would we link our currency to, what, the American dollar? Would we have our own money? There's all sorts of issues here. I mean, we sit outside of the European Union at the present moment. Under Protocol 3, we have this specially negotiated link into the European Union because of our host nation, the UK. Brexit. When the UK leaves the European Union, we sit with them. We might have, therefore, difficulties in trading. If we left England as well and went independent, we would have to trade on our own rights. Are we big enough? There's so many issues that, again, I'm not competent to give you an answer or even a fully reasoned explanation. But it is something that I think will be looked at in light of changes that are taking place as far as Brexit is concerned.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Mr. Pognon over there. It's not for you, it's for the television.
Oh, no. Is this switched on?
Yes.
Most people are aware that we're going to have a new hospital, if you didn't know, or forgotten about it. Now, do we carry on with this existing site, the preferred site, which is, to me, is diabolical? To build this alongside our existing hospital, with all the noise and work that entails, Kango hamming, drilling, demolishing buildings, God knows how much it's going to cost. And before, with a virgin site, you don't get all these problems. Now, there's a marvellous site up at Montalabé, where you all know where it is. Our constable has been speaking about it. And do we carry on shoehorning this into this existing site, or build a fantastic hospital somewhere else with plenty of room, all round, parking, the lot, all under one roof? Or do we carry on with this ridiculous idea? Or is it too late? Has the final decision been made? Thank you. I feel better now.
Nigel.
I wish I did. I have to say I've got great concerns about the hospital. again, I can only work on the information that I've got and that probably many people here in the room have got. But Overdale, we own the land, proximity to town, good access. Why don't we redevelop that? It's going to be a cheaper option. It's going to be a quicker option. Try knocking down and rebuilding your house while continuing to live in it. Imagine what the disruption, as I see it, to the hospital, even though it's been said that it can be created. So as far as I'm concerned, looking at what the costs are as well, acquisition of adjacent properties, compulsory purchase, building something that is controversial in its design, I don't understand, and I think that we should look. I do not want to delay things, but I do think that we need to look further into it to see whether the public are getting value for money and that this is the right decision and that we don't just go down the line because the decision, or many decisions, have already been made. If it's wrong, let's stop it.
It's interesting that over the last couple of weeks, one of the flyers that I've received from states departments and commercial enterprise has been from the group of people developing the hospital plan as it currently is. And they have sent a flyer around to all prospective candidates with the objective of persuading them that the current plan is the only plan. Well, it's my belief that that is wrong. And I am concerned about the disruption that the current arrangements are going to mean for people who are using the hospital and for the staff and the surgeons and the medical practitioners who are using the hospital. We need to find an open site that we can begin building from scratch in order to have a start date and a finish date. The farm at Montalabi is not the only site, as they would have us believe. There are other sites. We have not, I hope, discounted altogether the waterfront site. That is a brownfield site. It is there to build on. And I know it has an awful lot of value to developers and to the State's Development Board. But we do need to find that site. And we need to stop the progress of the development as it is. And we need to here take the politicians' responsibility to say to civil servants, all stop, let's find the site, let's redesign, let's build a hospital from scratch.
Very quickly.
Well, the site I had in mind was, well, you know, it's Warwick Farm. And I've driven through it lately a few times, had a good look around. It's a massive site. Virtually virgin land. There's only greenhouses all over, which the states have totally neglected, and they're all falling down. But apart from that, it's such a perfect site. You could make a fantastic hospital there. Lovely frontage, main road, not a mile from the hospital. You know, I just don't understand it.
We don't disagree with you, and we would press for that site. It is absolutely first choice.
I won't ask why you were looking around that site, but could we have the next question, please?
Hello, I'm Solène. I'm a doctor from St John's. I want to know what's going to be done with regards to the cost of this hospital, 500 million. In England, a lot of these small district hospitals don't cost, will probably cost about half as much to build. So I'm not understanding why they're having to spend twice as much here to get an extra, possibly 7 beds only. What are we spending £500 million on? And where are we going to get all the doctors and nurses to actually run this new hospital with the 7 extra beds, when last year we lost probably over 30, 35 nurses, and we're really not retaining the doctors here?
Yes, you talk about losing nurses. I know one ward at the hospital who lost 9 nurses within a course of a month. It is a chronic problem. The advantage to the current hospital arrangement has been taken away from us because they've had to redesign, because planners have said that it encroaches too much on the skyline. In doing that, they've reduced the number of beds to make it almost useless to actually develop the hospital at all. We need capacity in the hospital, which is gives the hospital flexibility when the pressures of winter and pressures of civil emergencies, for example, are presented at the door. As for the costs, I have to say that there is a cost in Jersey that is about the increased cost of living. The general costs of development are higher than in the United Kingdom. And there are packages, development packages available off the shelf, which make the costs in the United Kingdom very controllable. If we went to an open site, the 500 million would come down very, very significantly. There would not be the need to purchase properties, to clear properties in the first instance, to close sections of the hospital and demolish sections of the hospital. We could go from the beginning, from the ground up, and that would save significant sums of money.
My questions are the same as yours. That's why we say, are we getting best value for money? And I don't believe that. I don't believe that we are. When it comes to funding, that's a different issue, and I object in some ways to the thought of using some of our own money. When properly invested, it appears that we can achieve 12 to 14% and can borrow money at 3%. We always have the ability to draw down our own money and pay that money back. Why not actually use somebody else's money and keep our reserve for in case we need it, and we can always readdress it in the future. We haven't lost that money, we've just taken it to another place. Even whilst we do that, as far as the cost of the hospital is concerned, as I say, I think we should really, not wanting to slow anything up, but it needs to be readdressed because it just seems to be an unbelievable figure, and I don't know anybody who has said that anything different.
Okay. Any more questions? Young lady in the front.
Hello, my name is Michelle Pastorel. I'd like to understand how you propose to support agriculture going forward, particularly with regards to diversification within the island and supporting local farmers.
Which way round are we? It's Nigel. Yes.
Well, I think the agriculture industry, as I've seen it, seems to have adapted very well to the challenges that it's had. I've seen it change dramatically, what little I know about it. I've seen it change quite dramatically since I came here. I now see sheep. I see semen, bull semen, being brought in to increase the milk yield. I think that actually there is a place for financial support for people who want to go into the industry. And I also see that perhaps youngsters who want, again, who might have another job, could have these home small holdings, if you like. At the moment, it appears to me, I stand to be corrected, that they can't just move into that as a bona fide farmer. What is wrong with somebody who needs to earn elsewhere and has a small farm that may not be totally viable within itself to keep operating, but they can go to that in small ways. So I would think that we need to look at diversification. We may need to fund it, but we need to think out of the box and not just stick to some of the old routines.
Yes, I think that's the term, diversification. We have examples already of the states involved, and there was a notable chuckle about the States Farm being involved in cultivating experimentally hemp, which has a multitude of purposes and uses. And I can see green fields of hemp in Jersey. I believe you're growing tea.
That's right.
Yes. Tea is another crop that would be very profitable. And I think in looking at diversification, the agricultural industry will need to look at what is going to grow in Jersey, how much of it can we grow, and is it going to be economically viable to do that. We need to do that because our entire reliance on potatoes and other root crops and greens and so on is not going to sustain the industry. It needs to be much broader than it currently is.
Yeah, thank you.
Gary Grimshaw. There seems to be a growing trend of people from outside of the island buying up flats and reasonably inexpensive housing to rent to local people. What do you think about this, and how do you think you might put an end to it?
Thank you. It's interesting.
It is interesting. I don't think we have powers to prevent people buying property, and it would need to be looked at if it's considered to be a problem. I see an advantage to people owning property that they're then going to rent out to people in the island, as long as they're renting out at affordable rents for those people that need it. Generally speaking, the people that are buying property will maintain that property in their absence from the island. But if it is an issue, if the numbers of people buying from outside are actually denying people buying in the island, then it will need to be looked at as an issue. Yeah. And it may mean that we need to look at legislation to take care of that.
Well, I mean, obviously, with our housing restrictions, you can't just buy any property in the island willy-nilly. But you can buy these flying freeholds, and there's certain examples which I'm aware of where people not living on the island might own 6 properties, apartments that they bought as acquisition of shareholding. They get no rights for that. They're not established any residency. They bought it just as a commercial activity. I have a little bit of an issue with it as well, because I take your point that if somebody can come in and buy 6 apartments and to rent, are they denying the locals buying those properties? I question why it even came in, if that was the concern. I mean, why has this facility been created? I think it's something that we need to look at, but I can't answer your question in depth because I think it's quite a complicated subject.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman there. Sorry, you need the microphone.
Sorry, Terry Cotanche. Both the candidates have suggested that industries in the island have a problem recruiting, or more to the point, retaining staff, and that they're concerned with youngsters leaving the island and not returning. Could they tell me, do they feel that the danger of an increasingly ageing population in 2035 is the concern that those people have, or whether it may be related to the fact that 92% of median earners in Jersey cannot afford a mortgage?
Sorry, could I ask that
Can you
question
just,
again, please?
Just
Sorry.
ask that again. It wasn't very clear.
Yeah. Youngsters in Jersey have difficulty affording buying a house. There's a shortage of housing. The last gentleman asked how the candidates might view changes to prevent investors from outside of the island buying properties to rent in the island. Firstly, do the candidates view that as having any impact at all on housing values? And secondly, Do they think that youngsters who do not remain in the island are leaving because they have a fear of an ageing population or because they can't afford a house, given that 92% of median wage earners cannot afford a mortgage?
Well, how do you start answering that? I think we've covered the fact that we need to create new houses for youngsters. I think that first-time buyers' houses should remain as first-time buyers' houses, promoting people to leave those and buy in the more open market. I think if we want to completely close down investment in property, yes, I suppose we could bring in regulation, law to say that unless you have residential qualifications, you can't buy anything on the island. I don't know the implications of that, but they seem to be quite significant to me. I think that's as far as I can say.
Yes, the reference to young people leaving the island that certainly I made earlier was that there are a number of young people who have left the island because they've gone off for education or they've gone for other reasons, and they discover that their qualification, the qualification they've obtained through their education, cannot be met in terms of employment in the island. And so they go elsewhere, and they generally remain elsewhere and settle into a new society. We do need them back. We do need them to be earning significant salaries to be able to afford their first property. And very often that doesn't occur until people have found a partner and joint incomes have put them into sufficient income to make their first property. I do believe that it is taking property out of the market if we're allowing external investors to purchase for rent. It's taking property out of a buyer's market, and they probably would have been the properties that first-time buyers would have purchased in the first instance.
Okay. You've both asked questions. We're going for people who haven't asked questions. Melvin.
Good evening, gentlemen. I was quite taken aback in recent months when two of our ministers went head-to-head regarding our hospital project. I could barely believe that within the Council of Ministers there hadn't been some discussion in order that they would have come forward and not ended up with both of them with egg on their face. What would you two gentlemen like to put in place to allow the whole of the States Assembly to communicate in a more effective way?
TREVOR.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we've been suffering the so-called virtues of collective responsibility in relation to the ministerial group. They might argue between themselves and actually quite vehemently disagree, but they've presented a unified face. And when it does emerge that there are disagreements, it becomes a bit of a shock to the rest of the population. What ministers have not been doing and not been able to do because of the system is they've not been able to allow the House to debate issues that are particularly important, such as the hospital, a very divisive issue. And with a change in the ministerial code, there should be a facility for there to be greater debate in the states, and certainly scrutiny panels will have an important role in pinning down ministers who will be able to move away from the ministerial line if they're being questioned. And I think it's important that they can do that and express their own opinions. It would give us a lot more open government in that sense.
Thank you. Nigel.
Yes, I think open government is what's required, and I think that as a politician we need to earn respect. I have seen over quite a few years some examples which are not good examples to our youth, and that is through the government. We have to earn respect. I think that the Council of Ministers has got a difficult job. They're not a party. They are a group of individuals who I would have expected would have spoken together, but sometimes they disagree. It's not a party. I can't say any more than that.
Thank you. Steve.
Hello, my name's Steve Masters. The thing I wanted to know about more than anything, when we had a referendum, you said you wanted respect. We had a referendum here in Jersey, which the states ignored. Are you going to do the same? That's it.
Nigel, you're first this time.
I think that a referendum in a democracy is very important, and I think that politicians should listen to the voice of the people. I'm being advised that a referendum, actually, as far as the state is concerned, is only advice. It is not something that they are bound to follow. My personal opinion would be that a referendum is a big indication, depending upon the percentage, the way that it was voted. But if the majority of the people in a referendum were to make one decision, I think it would be inadvisable for the ministers to go against that.
It obviously depends what the referendum's all about, but any referendum will have a set of criteria in relation to the outcome and whether or not that outcome becomes binding on the political body. We have the situation in the UK where Brexit was voted for, and the government of the day have taken that as an instruction to remove the United Kingdom from Europe. This House chose not to be tied by referendum, but it could in the future choose to be tied by referendum. And it will be something that will need to be debated. And my personal feeling is that if the population have a strong feeling and they express that feeling through referendum, then we should respect that wish, and it should be implemented. We should implement the result of a referendum.
We have a gentleman at the back. I'm going to suggest that we have 3 more questions after this one. So the gentleman at the back, and then we'll have another 3.
Paul Michel, going back to our previous question, quite simply, if you were elected to the States, what position and which department would you like to be involved in? Thanks.
Trevor, you're first this time.
Oh, right. I have to say, I don't have any ambition to become a minister. We get that out of the way. I do have expertise in that I have experience in health. I have experience with home affairs, in that I have a long association with the Honorary Police, and developing court procedures and looking at law. So there is a role that I could conceivably fulfill as perhaps within the assistant minister frame. I would be very much more concerned to be involved in scrutiny. I think it's important that the States members look very carefully at propositions and at the decisions that are taken at ministerial level in order to make sure that we include checks and balances. So that's where I would be looking to head to scrutiny. Or if there were some assistant minister post, I might be interested in that.
I too am not intending to look for a ministerial post. My interests, as I've quite clearly said, would be in the tourism industry, agriculture and the general economic welfare of the island. I too would not object to being asked to sit on a scrutiny committee, but I'm waiting to see how the House is formed with the ministers who are responsible. And when I know who the ministers are, and if I'm asked, I would consider a deputy minister or certainly sitting on scrutiny.
Another question. All right, will Alan have a second? Oh, sorry, Mr. Jail hasn't had a question yet.
Andy Jail. Can the gentleman tell me if they support the recommendations of the care inquiry and if they give their full support if elected?
Your turn first.
Would Mr. Pointon care to go first on that, as it's much closer to his area of expertise?
The care inquiry has taken an awful long time to come to fruition. It has raised significant questions for this island, and there is significant work going on to address the issues that the care inquiry has put to the fore. We're looking to expand social services, to train social workers with new skills, and to generally rectify the support structures that have hitherto not existed for vulnerable children in this society. I've been closely involved over recent years with the group of people looking at safeguarding issues, and the care inquiry's findings have been all about Jersey's ability to safeguard vulnerable children that we look after or we have contact with. I'll be very much closely involved in implementing the care inquiry findings, and I really want the support of parishioners in looking at the way that the parish has safeguarding matters at its disposal.
I think it's absolutely essential that we listen to what we've been told. I said in my presentation, the first thing, I want to listen, I want to learn, and then I want to act. Well, we've listened, we need to learn, and now we do need to act. And the inquiry has come out with several recommendations. We would be very silly not to listen to them.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? I know Mr. Pugnol's waving his hand. Let him have a turn. Just wait, be patient.
It'll be too late afterwards if you don't ask.
In the microphone, please.
It'll be too late when we've left to ask a question, so you better do it now. The Elizabeth Terminal or Harbour, maybe somebody will shoot me down in flames. The restaurant hasn't opened yet, has it? No, only 4 years that they're messing around with it. Now I'm told, is that a good advert for Jersey? The gateway to the island? 4 years, they can't even run a cafe and they want 1 million visitors to come over? So what's going on?
All right, thank you. That's the question. Nigel, if you'd like to go first this time because you jumped last time.
Well, I don't think it's a joke. I'm sorry, it was just that he was giving me the question again as the... I know that. No. Oh, please do. Give it the States own the terminal building. The previous cafe proprietor there ran a cafe for quite some time. They obviously didn't find that it actually fulfilled their requirements as far as profit was concerned. I believe that there was negotiations taking place with a very competent restaurateur in the island. I'm also told that those very good relationships ended up as not good relationships, and I am not privy to the reasons why, but I'm extremely disappointed that the cafe hasn't opened, and I think it's a dreadful look for visitors who come to the island, and I'm very surprised, but I'm not aware as to whether there's any ongoing discussion, but there certainly should be, because it looks absolutely dreadful and doesn't serve the public in the way that it should.
I have to say, I don't think I can add to that. Those of us that do use the terminal, well, that's all of us at one time or another, have missed the facility over the number of years that it's been out of commission. The states need to get their act together in getting somebody in there to provide the service that people who are visiting and people leaving the island should have by right. The little facility there is there at present it doesn't really do the island any justice whatsoever.
I'm told every time I mention it, something particular tells me, well, it's not the States, it's the ports of Jersey. Now, who are the ports of Jersey? Do they run the show, or do the States run the show?
It's Quango, yeah. We have a question at the back there.
One more question.
You pull the door, you don't push it.
Nicholas Taylor. Both candidates have touched on this, so a very simple yes or no. Should constables be in the States? And second question is, should the bailiff remain as head of the States?
Trevor, your turn first, yes.
Yes and no.
Yes, and perhaps.
I think to expand on the no, the fact is that in a modern jurisdiction, to have no separation between the judiciary and the legislature is a very unusual place to be. And I think it would put Jersey into a proper light with our neighbours across the water to give the bailiff his proper role, and that is as head of the judiciary.
Right, I think we've just about done it, so we'll have one more question tonight. You've asked one, Mr. Day. The lady in the front here hasn't asked a question.
Could I just ask the two candidates?
Could we wait for the microphone? Oh, right. Yes, you're on television, you see.
Yes, okay. I just want to ask the two candidates for an honest answer to this question. Would they be standing for the states if the system that applied some years ago, where all our states members were not paid, still applied? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
I'm not sure who's answering first.
Trevor is.
The answer is yes.
Any elaboration on that?
No, the answer is yes.
Right, thank you.
My answer is yes as well.
Thank you.
Unless anybody's going to absolutely scream for an answer, I think we'd all like to thank both the candidates. They've given us a very honest evening and a very open evening. I'm sure they will be around if you have personal questions. They've both said they're going to visit every house in the parish, so I wish them luck. So it only remains to me to say thank you all for your attendance this evening. St John's have done extremely well. We're well over 100 people in the assembly this evening, and when you look at some of the other parishes who want more deputies, and they can't even get more than 15, 20 parishioners in their parish halls. So it is vital that we keep our deputy in this parish. And I hope people will continue to support that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.